Welcome to Ring of Fire. I'm Mike Papantonio. Today on Ring of Fire, we'll find out why charter schools are riddled with fraud and how your tax dollars are lining the pockets of school CEOs. We'll also tell you how police officers all over the country are getting their hands on combat weapons and using them when they can. And we'll also explain how President Obama forfeits his legacy by refusing to stand up to Republican obstruction. We have all that and more coming up, but right now, remember, you've just stepped into the Ring of Fire.
You can't change Washington from the inside. You can only change it from the outside.
Grand jury secrecy rules.
For political gain.
The press can find out.
That has nothing to do with politics, but go ahead.
It wouldn't bother me.
Oops.
One of the biggest takeaways from the Ferguson protest has been that our local police forces have been oversupplied with war toys, and they're more than willing to use them. Officers now have access to armored Humvees, assault rifles, science fiction caliber weapons designed to cripple our ability to peacefully assemble. Joining me now to talk about this is Howard Nations. Howard, everybody's hearing about the 1033 program, the big giveaway. It's scary when you start analyzing what's resulted in, isn't it?
It really is. You know, contrary to what you're hearing on television these days, the 1033 program was not a response to 911. This was launched in 1997. It was approved by the Congress, and the idea was to give away military surplus because back in 1997 we actually had military surplus. And they were trying to give the military surplus to local law enforcement agencies. Since that time, there have been 17,000 agencies in all 50 states that have received a total of $4.3 billion in military surplus. Just last year, in 2013, there was $500 million worth of military surplus distributed to the states.
Howard, what is the best source of article somebody could read on this if they wanted to understand 1033? Is there anything that you're relying on?
Well, you know, the 1033 is that what I told you about 1033, that's pretty much it. The effects of it, you can see, for example, in Georgia, you've had $200 million distributed to 600 agencies in Georgia. It occurs to me that maybe $200 million of federal taxpayer money could have been used a little bit better for education in Georgia. We've had ridiculous examples like Oxford, Alabama, 21,000 people, population, $10.4 million in military surplus equipment. And in Rising Star, Texas, population 835 people, $3.2 million over 14 months. Now you have to admit that they've been successful. There have been no terrorist attacks in either Oxford or in Rising Star, Texas.
Well,
so
no, wait. Let's back up on that. First of all, again, you're talking about, I call it the Barney Fife syndrome. The Barney Fife syndrome is policemen who's never had any real training on things like minesweepers or sound blast cannons or AK-47s with wooden bullets or assault helicopters, that these Barney Fife types are given all of this, thinking that, well, gee whiz, any moment now we're going to be invaded by Islamic terrorists. But the truth is, there have been no Islamic terrorists, but there have been a lot of sovereign citizen terrorists, haven't they? We're right there in our backyard. They don't need all this to deal with sovereign citizens.
Well, what broke this lately into the press has been, of course, Ferguson, Missouri, where you had the first picture of the SWAT team sniper standing on an armored vehicle, pointing a sniper rifle at peaceful protesters, and another officer pointing a rifle at peaceful protesters shouting, "I'll kill you." Since the death of Michael Brown, you've had massive display of militarized force. You've had armored vehicles, tear gas grenades, assault rifles, and smoke bombs. And then in the Sunday New York Times, you had the photograph of a line of policemen, deadly weapons pointed at protesters. And the problem is you've got deadly weapons distributed and absolutely no training in the use and the protocol. You know, I was taught in the military to use the M1A1 carbine, the M16, the M1 rifle, and the .45 caliber. But before I ever was allowed to fire one shot with them, I could take them apart and put them back together blindfolded. I spent hours and hours on the range like other military people did. We knew not only how to fire them, we knew when to fire them. We had classroom protocols. None of that comes along with just sending out all this equipment to, as you say, the Barney 5 contingent.
Well, when Richard Nixon started this, as you point out, it was we're going to fight drugs with this. You know, we need to give local police officers in cities where there's 10 to 15,000 population, we need to give them a helicopter, or we need to give them, honest to God, I mean, we're talking about mine-sweeping attack vehicles. Now, in a town of 10 to 15,000, and then as you point out, 9/11 takes place, and all of a sudden there's a terrorist behind every corner, and these characters end up looking like ninja SWAT commandos. I mean, dressed up in camouflage in the middle of the city. You know, where we used to have, I grew up in a lot of small towns, and in our small towns we had a police officer, he had a police uniform on, he carried a sidearm, but he also had a relationship with the community to where it wasn't always the risk of the community blowing up and going crazy because of the conduct of a particular police officer. But Howard, don't you believe that these guys become what they think about? If they want to dress up like Bruce Willis, the next thing you know, they're acting like Dirty Harry in Bruce Willis because they think about that all day. They see all these things that they perceive as threats. Isn't there an element to that?
If you dress like a SWAT member, you're going to act like a SWAT member, whether you're trained to be a SWAT member or not, basically. And there's an awful lot of evidence in Ferguson that this surplus equipment that was sent maybe with good intentions had not nearly enough training, if any training at all. President Obama says that it's useful to revisit the funding because it's good to get military gear where it's needed in the hands of our police officers, but we can't blur the lines between the military and local law enforcement. That would be contrary to our traditions. He's absolutely right about that. This program is just gone crazy.
Well, part of it is if you really drill down on this one, it is that the arms industry makes so damn much money selling this stuff. Okay, so the military buys far more than they need. Look at the stuff we left on the desert in Iraq. I mean, just rows of helicopters, rows of tanks, rows of all this multi-billion-dollar equipment sitting there in the desert that's now is being cannibalized by the locals. So now the other thing they do is they send it back. Some of it makes it back to the United States. Military doesn't have anything they can possibly do with it. So Barney 5 comes along and says, gee whiz, I'd like to dress up like a commando too. I'd like to dress up in a SWAT outfit. No, I don't have any training, but by God, I have the right to dress up like a ninja commando if I want. Isn't that kind of where this has all gone?
Well, it is. It goes back to Eisenhower's warning us against the military-industrial complex. Why do you give away $4.3 billion worth of military surplus? Because the only way you can replace that surplus for the people manufacturing it is to put it to some use. Back in 1997, when we weren't in perpetual war, they started this program to get rid of a lot of military surplus equipment so they could sell the military some more. I mean, that's basically what it's all about.
So now we have, I guess you followed the story on the drone tasers, where they have drones flying over the crowds. They drop what they call ball tasers into the crowd, and 50 lines go out and tase people for as much as 20 seconds. They've got a system, a microwave system, that they can blast 100. They can raise the skin temperature on a crowd to 130 degrees to where the people feel like they're burning up. That's done by microwave, and they can do it across a broad expanse. They've also got a laser cannon that they can blast you with. And the problem is when they started studying when and how policemen are supposed to use this, the training is almost non-existent.
Almost. You know, you and I have done programs before about all of these paramilitary units that are forming up in the United States and how they've become such a problem. This is paramilitary people funded by the government. with a government sanction. It's a terrifying situation, really.
Well, it does. I don't see any end in sight. Again, I don't. You have a lot more faith in Obama than I do. I hear him talk about things, but then I turn the page 3 days later and nothing's really happened. And he's talking about doing something here. I'd be frankly quite surprised if he does. Neither the Democrats or the Republicans want to take any action on this because.
Let me tell you who can take actions, though, Mike. There are communities like Ferguson all over the United States. If you're tired of the injustice in their community, resort to democracy. 3 things: voter registration, get out the vote, get African-American candidates to run for mayor, city council, and school board. It's been 60 years since the Board of Education gave you a lot of rights in this country, recognized rights that you should have had all along. It's time to assert those rights. You do that at the polling place.
Howard, thanks a lot. Appreciate you joining us, okay?
My pleasure, Mike.
The House of Representatives recently passed a measure that would hand $300 million worth of taxpayer money over to charter schools. Not only are these schools typically run by corporations that are looking to make a big profit, but they're ripe with fraud. I have Ruth Conniff, editor of Progressive Magazine, here to tell us what's happening. So, Ruth, what went wrong? You've got all the Wall Street Democrats. You've got Jeb Bush telling us that charter schools are the way of the future. It's not looking like that. By the way, great article that you did here on FBI targeting these charter schools. This is a story people just need to be more aware of. Lay this story out for us a little bit.
Well, we've been following this charter school story for a while. We started a website called publicschoolshakedown.org because we have noticed over the last 10 years the expansion of charter schools. What started out as an idea to do something innovative in public education, to run little schools that might have a bilingual program, an alternative program for kids who just didn't do well in the traditional classroom, has grown into this contraption, these mega charter companies that are sweeping into states like Wisconsin and Florida and all over the country, really. And they have found a way to extract public funds that are supposed to support public education for kids, and instead are enriching the folks who are running these big charter school companies.
The way the easiest way to analyze really the story behind the story here is to see what Scott Walker has done. Scott Walker started attacking the public schools, not because they weren't doing a good job, but because he wanted to destroy the school teachers' unions. He wanted to take the tax base and give it to corporations rather than having that tax base go towards paying for public schools. And so we see that happening all over the country. People don't understand why this is going on. The argument is, oh, gee, these kids are going to be smarter if we do this. Teachers are going to be better. Nothing's further from the truth, is it?
Right. I mean, the problem is there's been this campaign by people like Scott Walker and right-wing ideologues at the Bradley Foundation and other right-wing groups to say public education has failed. We need to give up on the idea of having a community school paid for by tax dollars. And instead, what we need to do is siphon public funds to private interests because business does everything better. And what has happened as a result of that ideology and the growth of this industry is that there are some shady operators who have stepped in to say, sure, we'll take some public funds, we'll pay ourselves big salaries, we'll sell products to the schools or charge ourselves rent, and public funds will enrich us. So what we see now is all over the country, all different kinds of shady operators running education as a way to enrich themselves through public funds, and the FBI cracking down in state after state after state, raiding schools.
We're seeing a new story almost every couple of weeks where the FBI is barging in to a charter school, taking the computer, taking all the records, because they do that, as you know, Ruth, they do that after they already have a pretty good case. Yeah. After typically a whistleblower has come in and said, let me tell you how this charter school is stealing from taxpayers. Let me tell you how this charter school is paying their executives millions of dollars, and they're hiring teachers that aren't even certified to teach. All these stories, story after story. Lay out some of the horror stories for us.
Well, in Hartford, Connecticut, they actually finally drove a charter school out of town after they uncovered the fact that the person who ran the school was a convicted felon who had served 5 years for embezzlement and was living on the public dime in a high-end brownstone but charging rent to tenants who he also ended up living there. There are some amazing stories. In Albuquerque, New Mexico, there was a guy who was a pilot who owned an airplane company. He figured out he could run an elementary school, which was raided because it turned out that he was embezzling funds and he was using public funds to purchase airplanes in order to teach kids to fly in a flight school that was associated with this elementary school and the secondary school that he ran. I mean, there's all kinds of rackets.
Well, first, Ruth, I thought was so interesting about your story. There are many things interesting about your story. But, you almost say, okay, well, this charter school, you think small, it's just isolated, it's mom and pop over there. They want to start a little local neighborhood school. But now what you have, it is a state-to-state industry where you have these large corporations. I mean, we've got them all over Florida, for God's sakes. These corporations coming in. This isn't mom and pop. Tell us about the new corporate structure for all this.
Yeah, I mean, it's hucksterism is what it is. I have a friend actually locally who helps to run a charter school, which is what is now derisively referred to in the charter school industry as a mom and pop. It's a small alternative school for kids who were doing really poorly in high school, and they needed more of an open classroom. They needed a restart really in life. So this does still exist. And I think a lot of folks, what they don't realize is that while those little charters, those little progressive ideas that are supposed to be replicated in the regular public schools still exist, they have been overwhelmed by this new model of these big mega charter school companies and their lobbyists in state capitals like here in Wisconsin. What they're saying is, instead of the local public school district authorizing a charter school, we're going to take it statewide. We're going to allow ourselves to operate in every district in the state. We're going to siphon money out of every school in the state. And perhaps what we're going to run is an online program. So no bricks and mortar, no teacher salaries, no lunch lady, no sports team. Same funding though, same amount of money per student. And we just sell this online program to people, and the taxpayers pay for it, and the folks who run it get rich.
Plus, we're going to throw in some uncertified teachers because we don't have to pay them as much. We can pay them, just hardly anything, and they'll come in and teach even though they aren't qualified to teach. They're not certified to teach. And the other benefit that corporate America gets here is it's another attack on the unions. I mean, all of a sudden, unions have no significance because everything is chartered. I know I saw in your article you talked about Rupert Murdoch with News Corp in the relationship between ALEC and how they're bragging about, wow, this is a new money bonanza. Get involved. Go out and get involved because corporate America, you can really make a lot of money by these scams, these charter school scams. I mean, they're shameless about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really shady operators, which is why we have all of these FBI raids. But the basic model, this basic philosophy that this public institution, public education is a failure. This is their message. It's a failure. So what we need to do is open the door to all kinds of shady business deals to run their own schools. And it's really the destruction of the idea of a baseline of public education for American students. And it's led to some unbelievably lousy results.
I saw in your article where you talked about the Morning Star reporting that between 2012 and 2013, executive compensation for one of the corporations, the K-12 corporation, was about $11 million. And then in 2012, it went, right now it's $21 million is the executive compensation. In other words, that's money that's moved away from the kids. Kids aren't benefiting from that taxpayer money. The people who are benefiting are the people who are cashing in on our kids. Isn't that kind of what's happening here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's why Rupert Murdoch said it's a $500 billion sector, K-12 education in the United States alone. Well, that's the money that all of us, each individual household pools, because we believe that we should educate children. And so to look at that in aggregate and say, hey, here's a whole bunch of money that you could get your hands on and enrich yourself is a very different view of what education is all about.
Has anybody been thrown in jail yet? My prediction is there will be a good number of people thrown in jail before it's all over. But people have gone to jail already, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I think it's so important. That's why I called the FBI to ask about this pattern that we had noticed of these raids all across the country to say, is it true that you are forming a special task force, the same way that the FBI decided to concentrate on the mafia and all its arms on charter schools. And what they said was, we can't tell you there's a special task force, but what we can tell you is we're working with the Department of Education and we're taking proactive steps to look at charter school fraud across the country.
All connected.
There's so much.
All connected to Wall Street, and I wish they would take that net and net some of the criminals on Wall Street, because this goes all the way back to Wall Street. Ruth, as usual, great material. Just you just always have the story that we ought to be reading, and this is one of them. Thank you for joining me, okay?
Thank you, Mike.
For both of Obama's elections, union leaders rallied their members to vote in droves for Obama, and those numbers helped secure victories. But once they were no longer needed, those unions realized that Obama and his advisors were not their friends, and many of Obama's former advisors have actually gone to work to bust up unions. Joining me now to talk about that is David TeSelle. David, I'll tell you what, the Obama aides that, you know, when they were working for the Obama administration, man, they were all about the union and how the American labor union was so important, and how, you know, when they were working and getting their paycheck from Obama and advising Obama and being the press secretary for Obama, it was all about, we got to have labor. It's interesting to me now the way they've changed completely. It's like now they're attacking labor. The same people. Go ahead and name some names here.
Well, this is great. Mike, again, thanks for having me. I mean, we're talking about people that actually helped the Obama campaign win, some of the big players that were very pro-union to get the votes to be able to beat Romney, to say how bad Romney was going to be. And now they're going out and they're actually profiting from going against the unions. You have Jim Messina, who now has gone to London and is helping the Tory party, the conservatives, who are running on a campaign to make it close to impossible for unions to actually go on strike, to make it impossible to picket, for the votes to go on strike to be so high that no one will do it. David Plouffe, Robert Gibbs, and Ben LaBolt, all three went to Uber.
Okay, so you got David Plouffe, you've got Ben LaBolt, you've got Robert Gibbs. All of them were out there with their hands out, like paupers, like beggars to the unions. Please give our candidate some money. When they were running, when they were with the administration, and now they're attacking the very people they had their hands out to, right?
Exactly, and saying how that they were the ones that were pro-union, that it was the right thing to do, that unions are important for this country, and now they go out to a company like Uber, which is really about destroying the taxi unions in our big cities, where Rahm Emanuel, another Obama person from the past, who's the mayor now, who allowed Uber to put its cars on the streets, who aren't regulated, who don't have the same requirements that taxi companies do, and allow them to compete against the taxi unions who have to actually follow all the rules and regulations as they go. This is about making money. This is about cashing in for the work that they've done. We're talking about Uber is backed by Goldman Sachs, who is one of the big banks that plundered this country.
And plundered unions all over the country.
And plundered unions all over the country to do this. And so there's plenty of places that these people could go to make a good, honest living. But they chose...
By helping people.
By helping people, but they chose to actually go against the unions. Makes me wonder, you know, I think back to 2008, I think back to the election with Hillary, and when the unions were initially had backed Hillary, if this is just payback, if this is petty politics of Obama saying, here's something for you for not being with me at the beginning.
You know where else you have a ton of the, again, I call them the Obama beggars. The Obama
right.
beggars with their hands out. Oh, we're going to do so much for you. Change is coming. We're going to leap forward with some great change in this country if you just give us your money. So some of these same Obama political beggars, when they're working for Obama, they're also trying to defeat public education. They want to destroy teachers' unions so they can bring in their chartered schools that are now being invaded and raided by the FBI for being criminal enterprises. Just scams
Robert
of all kinds.
Yeah, Robert Gibbs, a name we just mentioned at Uber, and Ben LeBolt, they have a PR agency known as the Insight Agency. And what they do, they've actually signed on to work on lawsuits that really are trying to break down teachers' unions and tenure and the things that are really important to keep the good teachers out there working. This is not just one-off. This is a systematic attack on unions at all levels, teachers' unions, labor unions, really what has been the backbone of making sure that we have a good middle class in this country.
Yeah, I look at Campbell Brown as another great example, isn't she? Campbell Brown from CNN.
Great example.
Always, you could tell she was trying to prepare for her next career on the way she would beat on unions with CNN. Okay, so look, you've got all these. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Well, look at Wisconsin. Look at Scott Walker, ultra conservative, who ran and has made his name nationally on attacking unions and basically breaking teachers' unions and government unions. This over the past 20 years, the right-wing groups have spent over $170 million to brainwash this country into believing that unions are just bad and un-American. And what's unfortunate is if you don't fight back, is if you don't call a lie, if it's said over and over and over enough, people believe it's the truth. And that's where we're at right now, is that they are spending so much money with press release after press release. You have think tanks, you have these Republican foundations that are just putting out the false message that people hear it enough on TV and on radio. Mainstream media just picks up the anti-union and it becomes awful.
Isn't it more? I mean, it's becoming clear almost every day of what happened to this presidency. Yes. It's like Cornel West said. I love the quote. I think it was something to the tune that we thought we were electing John Coltrane and we got Kenny G. It was just a big scam. But the real question is how that scam's been there from the beginning. I mean, here now we're seeing it, aren't we? We're seeing the other side of it.
They're not out. Pulled back from our eyes so we can actually see what we got.
So these were guys that had their arms around the unions. Oh my God, you're so important. It's the future of America. Can you give us another $1 million? And then now we find out they're doing everything they can to destroy unions. Now, one thing that I see about this story I think is really important is if you look at the people that are leaving the Obama administration that didn't have these Wall Street connections, like David Pov, like DeBolt, like Robert Gibbs, like Rahm Emanuel, like Geithner, like Summers, these incredible, unshakable Wall Street love affairs that all these Obama administrators had. I mean, just they're in the pocket of Wall Street. There's a group of them, though, that I was looking at, Jeremy Bichard and Mitch Stewart.
AFL-CIO.
These are people who were really public service advisors to Obama. Now, what are they doing? They're not working to destroy unions. They're working to continue what they preached when they were working for Obama. Tell us that story.
Well, they're actually the ones that are still out there, and they're still fighting at the ACLU, at the AFL-CIO, and actually fighting for what we need. But isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that we have this same theme that we come back to about Wall Street and about cashing in and about it's the individuals that work. That worked in the administration that are now going out and are now profiting off of, what have you done for me lately? It was important when they were out there begging and they were asking for the money and they were saying, we need the money for the administration so that you can be protected and unions can be protected. They just wanted the votes. And once the votes weren't needed anymore, now it's about cashing in for them. It's about them getting their individual money, and Obama and the rest of the administration doesn't care, except for the people that don't have those ties to Wall Street.
Yeah. In other words, the people that surrounded Obama that did have real public service ties, they're doing public service work after they leave the administration. The Wall Street, you may as well put a big W just square in the head of most of Obama's administrative advisors, and that's what has destroyed this presidency. Go take a look at that article that Cornel West wrote. The interview on Salon. It's very disturbing. He breaks down exactly how many things Obama has given away to Wall Street that has crushed the average worker out there. David, thank you for joining us, okay? This story will continue, I can promise you.
Great.
When we come back, we'll hear from best-selling author Thomas Frank about how Obama has already forfeited his legacy. We'll be right back. Stay with us right here on Ring of Fire. We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
Tom, as I read your article about what a museum built in honor of Obama might look like, the thing that struck me was you would have to include as a major wing of that museum, and maybe the entrance, a museum of disillusionment. That's the way I look at it, and I think mostly progressives who are honest and paying attention to it and honest about what's happened with the Democratic Party and what happened with this administration, they'd at least have to factor that in somewhere, wouldn't they?
You would think so, and and you actually put it very well. A museum of disillusionment. That's a real challenge, and I would like to see a museum actually do something like that. But I mean, I'm joking. Presidential libraries never do things like that. Mm-hmm. I went to a whole bunch of them. About a month ago, I went to the Clinton Museum and I went to the two Bush museums, and the whole object is to basically lionize the president in question and get him off the hook for his bad decisions.
Yeah. Well, there are many. I don't know that bad decisions would really be the heart of this. I think, to me,
for Bush Jr.
Yes, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, of course, we could do several wings on that. Yeah. But as you look at this, I mean, here's the difficulty that progressives have, especially if they have a small d at the end of the name of their title. You've got the problem of them being honest about what really just happened to us these last 6 or 7 years. As you point out in your article, you had a president that came in that was living under the old sacred idea of the fact that we have to appease, that the center must hold, that we're a party of compromise, and that we're going to continue that myth that was actually created, certainly by Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton bringing in Wall Street we're this new party now, and so give me your thoughts on that. I mean, how bad was it with Barack?
Well, the thing, remember, I speak as one of those. I was a journalist at the time, so I was never really, involved in the process. But as somebody that voted for him and that I actually thought that Barack Obama was going to bring with him a different kind of politics to Washington. And we were in 2008. This country was at a turning point. The sort of what would you call it? New era that had begun. The era that had begun with Ronald Reagan, or maybe even a little before. The great turn to the right that so many people have written about. That it was, it had ended in disaster on Wall Street. This ridiculous war in Iraq, and it looked like the game was over. There was no, this was at an end. It had done its damage to the middle class. Everybody could see through it. And here comes this man who, a lot of us thought was exactly the right man for this moment. And what does he proceed to do but to, prop it back up one more time?
Well, I think back, and you mentioned in one of your articles, you talk about the Obama speech to Wall Street telling him that, I'm the only thing in between you and the pitchforks.
Yeah.
And then
and do you remember how that felt at the time?
Exactly. It felt right.
It sounded kind of like daring.
Exactly. And then the next thing you know, as you point out, he becomes a one-man rescue squad for the economic order that was created by Wall Street. And nothing has changed. I mean, you have this, you love it. The age of zombie consensus is the term that you use, and I do love that. But, we forget how young Obama is. we forget the fact that, at his young age, he still is very naive and very impressionable. Now, that's just the truth. And you take a look at what he embraced that Bill Clinton handed down to him, and he not only embraced it, but he actually put it on steroids in a lot of situations, didn't he?
Yes, he certainly did. I mean, the part that's going to, resonate with your audience right away is his years-long pursuit of what he called the grand bargain, which you can look at in the small sense is just a deal with the Republicans on deficit issues, but I think he had his eye on it, a grand bargain in the larger sense, which is he will stop this silly partisan nonsense in Washington, D.C. once and for all. It's tactically stupid because we know how the Republicans will react. They'll react the same way they did under Bill Clinton. It's a well-known. What happened in the Clinton era has been written about, and
nobody understands it or reads it or believes it.
Obama didn't. That's what I don't understand. This is an intelligent man. I used to live in his neighborhood in Chicago before I moved here, and he was my state senator.
What was your thought?
What was University of Chicago?
What was your
thought
then?
These are very intelligent people we're talking about.
Okay, but
here.
Thomas, what was your impression then? Even back then, was there a notion that, gee, he's a wonderful speaker? He's just a wonderful, charismatic
God, yes.
speaker.
We thought he was the greatest thing in the world.
But then, when did you have? Did you ever start maybe suspecting something's not right? Then maybe. Even as a senator, I certainly did. I was just
no, I personally did not because he was just a state senator, and I didn't really. All I thought is that when you'd meet him at a house party or something, all I think was,
this is a president.
What an incredibly talented and intelligent man this is.
Yeah.
This guy is going to go really, really far in life.
Yeah.
That's what you'd think. And I assumed he was a liberal because we all were.
Right. That was the assumption. Okay, so where we landed with this movement to try to completely carve out and memorialize this idea of centrist politics.
Center, which is just the sheerest folly. But I should, in a point in Obama's favor, it's a folly that is uniquely sort of believed in, uniquely agreed upon by people in academia, people in Washington, the sort of democratic political class. They think chasing the grand bargain is like, a really wise thing to do.
Okay, your article I thought did such a great. Well, most of everything you write, Thomas, resonates with anybody who's thinking about these issues seriously. But I look at this. I look at your article where you talk about, the idea of the Democrats will always blame Obama's failures on obstructionism. You talk about where did it leave us? Where did it leave us on health care? Where did it leave us on their willingness to almost give up on Social Security?
Yeah, on health care. I'm all in favor of some kind of national health program, and I'm glad we got Obamacare. But it also dulls it dulls us to the fact that these guys, these Republicans are like a circus. It is hilarious. It's nonstop. It's a three-ring action. But the fact is they aren't the entirety of the problem. They're probably about half of it.
If you take a look at it, they've objected to, economic policies that have been awful, but then they come around and they don't really care if unions evaporate. They don't care that.
And that's a failure in two distinct ways, and I'm going to tell you what those ways are. First of all, because what the country needs, the basic policy thing, that what we need is, we need someone that acknowledges where we are historically, that the sort of Reagan model has failed, pretty much catastrophically. The middle class is coming apart. Wall Street is robbing us. Right down the list. Pollution in Lake Erie. It's like it has failed in every sense. But second of all, you hate these Republicans so much. You love to make fun of them. Blah 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 blah. They have to beat these guys. The Democrats have to beat these guys, and the centrist model doesn't do it.
Okay, but the argument is, and this takes us back to the beginning of the discussion about Obama, the argument is, please, stop criticizing centrist Democrats. That's the mantra of the Democratic
always
Party,
say that,
we're now populist. Don't you see we're populist now? Well, hell, I don't see that they're populist. I don't even recognize.
You read this all over the place now, by the way. The pundit class in Washington, D.C.
Please stop criticizing the Democrats for being centrist that we're not.
The non-progressive Democrats, because we're part of a big coalition, and can't you see that you populists are in the driver's seat now?
Really?
And so please stop criticizing us. You have to stop criticizing us. But your centrist Democrats are just, they just expect the world to be delivered to them because they're, 5 out of 10, right? They've got the scale of 10, and 1 is the left and 10 is the right, and damn it, they're 5. So they win automatically. They think this political science is going to deliver, this triangulation is going to deliver the world to their feet, and they're
the best characterization I think I might have heard was maybe from Tom Hartman. I can't quite remember, but it had to do with the idea that you have Democrats, and the Democrats deliver on social issues, whether it's DOMA, whether it's same-sex marriage, whatever, immigration, whatever, and then it's as if nobody pays attention to the fact that they are driving a train through decency economically with Wall Street, that they have such a powerful matchup with Wall Street that all we do is it's I think it's called the Birkenstock Democrat approach to politics. That is, give us these social issues, hell with the fact that we can't feed our family, hell the fact manufacturing jobs are leaving, that we're outsourcing everything, and that seems to be okay with Democrats right now. And I don't know how you change that, because you've got these I call Birkenstock Democrats who buy into it.
Well, we're at a curious, this is sort of a more abstract academic discussion, but we're at a curious place with the two-party system where the system itself doesn't work anymore. And it doesn't work because one side, meaning the Republicans, have figured out how to game it, which is to constantly push to the right. And they don't always get everything that they want, but they've moved the entire conversation their direction. And so you've got, the things that the country actually needs and the things that the country actually wants are not represented, are not even on the table anymore.
That's true.
They were briefly in 2008, 2009, 2010. It's gone now.
Yeah, we thought. That's coming back to the beginning of the conversation. That's why we thought Obama was going to matter.
We came to a turning point and we didn't turn.
Yeah, Thomas Frank, thank you. Great material as usual. If you're progressive that care about what's happening to this damn country, read Thomas Frank. Thanks a lot.
Sure, anytime.
So, Pap, I hate to do this to you, but it seems your governor, again, has found himself in hot water. This guy, I don't know how this guy got elected in the first place, and I hope to gosh you folks in Florida get with it and don't elect Lex Luthor to another term.
It's embarrassing. Florida has fallen so far. When they regard Florida the same way they used to regard Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia and Louisiana as just kind of a podunk state. And that happened, when we had Marco Rubio elected to the Senate and Rick Scott came in. That was the year of the teabaggers, when they had all the dead and near dying, old teabaggers show up to vote, and they all voted Rick Scott in. But unfortunately, it looks like they could do it again, as incredible as it is. Almost every week there's a news story about Rick Scott. One last week, Rick Scott, where he has a campaign ad where you've got a convicted human trafficker endorsing him. They had to pull that election campaign ad. It was just so ridiculous. The arms around him, he just, he's a human trafficker. The next thing we learn is, you got Rick Scott taking huge money from, some fat cat lawyer named Rothstein, where he's, had this relationship with Rothstein. Well, Rothstein is in prison now and being, involved in all kinds of investigations about his Ponzi schemes that he had working all over the country. So, but it doesn't seem to bother Rick Scott because Rick Scott's used to, that's kind of his element. This is a guy that stole $1.4 billion from taxpayers at the very least. I think he only had the company that he was the CEO of was HCA. They ended up paying $1.7 billion in fines because they had stolen so much money from Medicare and Medicaid. And you remember the story, Rick Scott had to raise his hand and plead the Fifth Amendment 78 times because he knew he was going to be convicted as a criminal if he didn't. And then from there he goes on to become governor of Florida. But that's typical of Florida politics. That's what I have to live with every day. It's the influx of everybody from, good God, they moved down here in droves from the this entire southern ring. Used to be they came down from New Jersey and New York, and these folks that were just coming down here to die would destroy our politics. Well, now it's a little more complicated even than that. We have this influx of just really, really right-wing conservative types that are just flooding into North Florida, and they're making their way down to Central Florida right now.
And Pap, one thing that I've been following too is the case of the judge who found that Florida's redistricting was done illegally, and an attempt to write new districts in time for this 2014 election. What is happening on that front?
Well, nothing's happening. You had the legislature came back and gave him another map that was exactly like the map that he said he was going to kick out of court. The reason they did that is because they know by the time it appears in front of court, by the time that there's a hearing about it, a trial about it, an appeal about it, that the election will be over. So it's not going to mean anything. So yeah, the judge may say, yeah, I was right, but they don't care. This is one of the most corrupt legislatures that the state probably has ever experienced. I mean, it's just amazing how bad it is down here right now. Don't move here, okay? Do not move to Florida, because you will.
I don't think that's in the cards. But I know this week that the plaintiffs in the case were arguing that the judge could rewrite the maps, but I guess we'll have to see. He's floated everything from rewriting the maps himself to perhaps delaying the election. It'll be fascinating to see how that influences things. And while we're talking, Pap,
they'll just go to another court and stop. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I mean, while we're talking about elections, and I got to say, I don't know what it is with governors this cycle, but between Cuomo and Christie, and now Texas Governor Rick Perry,
McDonald. I mean, it just goes. Yeah, but anyway, go ahead.
Well, we may have to start some type of federal penitentiary specifically for sitting governors. Maybe they could put in, high-speed internet and phone lines there for them to do their work there. But Rick Perry will be basically has been booked or will be indicted, I guess, or is indicted this week. And he is facing charges that he illegally used a veto threat to influence the actions of a state worker. And in many states, I'm not even sure this would be illegal, but it seems to be that this case is going forward in Texas. And
I think the second part of I think that part of the case is dead on arrival. You got a Texas governor that has, he can be capricious in his veto power. I mean, he can do whatever the hell he wants to do in his veto power. I mean, that's just the way the law is written. The only thing he can't do is if somebody is able to show a pattern where he's implementing vetoes where you have a connection to money that he might have gotten from some entity. Let's say Acme Construction Company gave him money, and then the next month you see him vetoing a law that would have adversely would have caused harm to Acme Building Company. Now that you can get there, but the first part of it has some possibilities. The first part of the indictment is going to be that there was an investigation going on to how grant money was being written by an organization there in Texas, and it appeared that the grant money was going to Rick Perry's staunch conservative supporters, and so you have to see, was there a quid pro quo in the grant money going from point A to his supporters. That has some possibilities, and you can start drilling down and you can start looking under, kicking over a bunch of rotten logs, and you're going to find something on Perry because Perry believes that he's bulletproof. He's just like Tom DeLay, who got away with it. Tom DeLay, the appellate court took away any charges against him, any convictions against him. And so Perry really does feel bulletproof, Sam. He doesn't feel like these things are going to affect him at all.
Pap, I guess we should be thankful for small favors because in the past couple of weeks, the Republicans have come out and made very explicit, which I think we know is problematic with our system of government. David Sirota has been doing a lot of reports lately on the actions by several governors. Chris Christie comes to mind. The Democratic governor of Rhode Island comes to mind, wherein these governors take their pension funds, their state pension funds, and begin to invest them with hedge fund managers and with very risky, basically investment bank deals. And one of the elements of this is that these, particularly the hedge funders, have a mechanism whereby they get incredible amounts of fees for very often very poor returns on these pension funds. Mm-hmm. And it is illegal, at least in some states, for a governor to provide these funds to any company and allow them to get fees from it if they accept campaign contributions to them.
They can't mean a quid pro quo. He said, I give you this campaign contribution in exchange for you giving me complete control over your public pension.
Right.
That's
I mean, this seems,
which makes perfect sense.
To most people, this seems completely reasonable,
right?
Because you wouldn't want a situation where a governor has a legal way of so blatantly rewarding people for
with somebody else's money,
with
mom and pop pension money. Where the worst part about what you just described, if you take. You can go down the list of every time this has occurred. I mean, no exaggeration. Every time this has occurred, whether it's Bobby Jindal or Chris Christie or Rick Perry that's taken this pension money and he's made it available for Wall Street, every time mom and pop pension loses compared just to the regular market. In other words, had Wall Street not come in and taken their high fees, had they not put them in risky investments so they could churn these pensions. That's what they do. They got a gazillion dollars that they can churn every day, even though mom and pop loses, Wall Street makes money. And you look at that and you say, God, that can't be right. Well, now the GOP lawsuit is that Wall Street has the constitutional right to corrupt politicians. That's the story that David Sirota did in Salon.com. It's an excellent story. But that's their position.
This suit comes only a few weeks after the SEC issued its first fines under the rule against Governor Tom Corbett, a Republican, and Philadelphia Mayor Michael Nutter, a Democrat. And so the GOP is now basically saying to the SEC does not have the ability to do this. They don't have the expertise in campaign finance. And they basically are saying what you said, that it is the constitutional right of bankers to express their happiness with governors that do this and local officials, and then they're right to get business from them.
Yeah, well, they're trying to overturn on constitutional grounds. They're trying to overturn the pay-to-play law that bars governors or any politicians from raising campaign money from Wall Street by using their state pension funds. That makes perfect sense to anybody. But when this
is called a kickback.
Yes, of
right?
course.
I mean, that's what it is.
But of course, when the Supreme Court looks at this, they're going to say, "Oh, sure, there's nothing wrong with this." I mean, look, you're talking about a bunch of hookers, on Republican hookers on the Supreme Court right now. The majority they're just nothing but that prostitute their position, and so they're going to go along with this. This is going to be fine. And the GOP knows that they can win this lawsuit, so why not take a chance?
Absolutely stunning. And speaking of buying a politician, I can't imagine why Comcast would be feeding one member of the FCC.
Tell that story. Some people, when you run this story by them, they go, "What?" Lay the story out. It's an incredible story.
So Comcast is underwriting with a six-figure donation. Well, actually, it's 110 from Comcast, another 25 from Time Warner.
Yeah,
of course, those two want to join each other. Mm-hmm. And they are sponsoring the Walter Keitz Foundation annual dinner in September. And this year's honoree, breaking a 35-year tradition, will be actually a sitting FCC commissioner, Minion Clyburn, someone who very well may be the swing vote on whether or not the merger takes place. It's absolutely stunning.
Oh, but let me tell the rest of the story. Now, you have Comcast saying, "Oh, gee whiz, we had no intention. We have no intention of getting things." And this is really what they said with a straight face. "We have no intention of getting anything back from this. We're just doing it because we just really like this Clyburn. We just think he's a real star." And I mean, that's honestly, they're with a straight face. That's what they're telling us. About $130,000 that they put into it. And they just said, "We just really like this. We really like this guy." So anyway, again, is that something they'll get away with? Yes, it is, because you're not going to have corporate media paying any attention to this story. Corporate media is so afraid to do anything that, to where they don't get their way with the FCC, which you've always got the FCC giving them everything they want. And we were supposed to. Now, let me round this out a little bit. We were you had Obama, who was going to take control of the FCC problem. You remember that? We're going to make appointments. We're going to make sure it's responsible to the to the public rather than the corporations. Anything but that has happened. So we
have a former industry lobbyist now as the chair of the FCC. Of course. Attacking net neutrality. I mean,
all this president has to do is make a telephone call, say, "Look, we are going to support net neutrality. We're not going to allow this." All he has to do is pick up the phone, Sam, but he won't do it. He won't do it. He'll make speeches. He'll make speeches about how unfair it would be, but he won't pick up the phone and make something happen. That is example A of this president.
And we don't want to wait for the Department of Justice to talk about antitrust when we're talking about this behemoth that would be Comcast and Time Warner Cable. Because, you just can't hold your breath for that long and retain consciousness.
That's it for this week's Ring of Fire, but you can keep up with us throughout the week online at ringoffireradio.com or on Twitter at Ring of Fire Radio and on Facebook. I'm Mike Papantonio. We'll see you next week right here on Ring of Fire.